Hello everyone and welcome back to my true crime channel. Today I want to cover a case that's been in the British press quite a lot over the last month, and I've got to admit I feel a bit stupid about this case. It's the tragic murder of Caroline Crouch, 20-year-old Caroline Crouch, by her husband in Greece. Now, news about this case broke about a month ago in the UK, and on the first day that it broke in the news, I'm not sure which newspaper I was reading the article in, I saw the husband's face, and I've got to be honest, didn't see much emotion. I then watched an interview that he gave, which was all in Greece. So for me, as a Brit that doesn't speak a word of Greek, it was quite difficult to know what he was saying. Now, I've since read what he said in English, but to analyse the statement is a bit difficult because it wasn't said in English, but I have read what it meant in English. But what I will say is, without knowing what that man was saying in a foreign language, I was reading his body language because that was all I could read, not understanding the language that he was speaking. And from 2 seconds after watching him on telly, I knew he'd done it. I've got to be honest. I knew he'd done it. I knew he'd killed his wife. But I felt so bad to judge someone when the case has only just hit the press. And bearing in mind her poor parents, Susan and David, believed him, believed that intruders had broken in and murdered their daughter Caroline. They didn't think for a minute that it was her husband Babis. They didn't believe it was him at all. So his pretense of, I didn't commit the murder, obviously had worked. It hadn't worked on the police, but Babis obviously didn't realise that. But I'm a bit annoyed at myself here because I didn't trust my own self-judgment. I didn't trust my instincts. I didn't trust my women's intuition. And I got to be honest, I knew within literally 2 to 3 seconds of seeing the man on the telly that he had guilty knowledge. I knew it. I knew he had no sympathy for his wife. I knew that the tears that he faked at her memorial service were a load of shit. I knew he was guilty. So in future, guys, I'm going to trust my judgment and I'm going to call out these guilty bastards. I really am. I'm not going to leave it a month down the line. And I had no idea that he'd confessed. Wow, where have I been? Clearly watching all the Britney news in the last couple of days and the Euro football. Got to admit, I have been watching that as well. But I had no idea he'd confessed. I thought he was guilty, but now I was obviously right. And I wish that I'd called him out sooner, but I didn't want to be disrespectful to Caroline's family. They clearly believed that he hadn't done it. And I didn't want to be putting videos out on the internet when someone's only been dead a few days, a couple of days. I didn't want to be disrespectful. But that guy is a nasty bastard, and I wished I'd called him out now. But what's interesting to know is that the Greek police had his number. They pretty much suspected him off of the go. His lack of emotion on his face, his strange body language, not wanting to use his wife's name. What he didn't realise is they had a lot more on him that they found within evidence in the next couple of weeks after the murder, and I'll share that with you guys later. But something he said to the press on more than one occasion that I just want to repeat to you is, imagine how I feel. Imagine how I feel. Don't imagine how Caroline felt, who was murdered in front of her young baby Lydia, 11-month-old baby. Don't worry about her. Don't worry about the dog that was drowned and then strung up from the stairwell to make it look like some intruders had killed the dog. I don't get it. I never get why people want to kill the dog as well. I never get why people want to kill anyone, but why the dog? I'm guessing the dog would have barked and alerted to what he was doing, potentially attacked him and tried to fend off him when he was attacking Caroline. So I think that's probably why he killed the dog. But sick, this guy is sick, and I hope he rots in prison. So I'll start at the beginning for you guys. On May the 11th this year, 20-year-old Caroline Crouch was found murdered at her home that she shared with her husband, Babis. Now, I'm going to try and pronounce his last name, but apologies if I don't get it right because it's a very long last name. His last name is, well, his first name is Babis and his last name is I can't even get it. It's so long. Aganostopoulos. So Babis Anagnostopoulos. If I've got that wrong, I'm so sorry. I've not ever been to Greece since I was a little kid. I don't ever remember going there. I can't speak a word of Greek, and that's a really hard name to pronounce. So on May the 11th, Caroline was tragically murdered by her husband because she wanted a divorce. She tried to book herself into a hotel that night, bless her heart. She'd sent a message, maybe a text message to a friend to say that there were troubles in the marriage and she wanted to leave him. When she told him this, he wasn't having none of it. He didn't want her to obviously ever be with anyone other than him, and he thought he'd end her life. What a sicko. And he's now come out and said that he did it for their little girl Lydia. Sorry, you murdered her mother for her, did you? What, so she can now have no mother, no father, know that her father killed her mother and be brought up by her grandparents? Really? Yeah, you really did it for your daughter, didn't you? Clearly a psycho. Now, the husband, Babis, was 33 years old, so he was 13 years older than Caroline. He apparently was very controlling. Coercive control was used within the relationship. She wasn't allowed to see her friends. She wasn't allowed to do what she wanted. And in the months leading up to her death, she clearly had told friends that there were problems within the marriage. She'd written about the problems in her diary. They were separately seeing, I don't know if it was a counsellor, but someone, maybe a psychologist or a counsellor separately, and what they've reported back has apparently been quite shocking. I've not been able to find out what that was. If I do get more information on this case, I will most likely do an update for you guys, but the signs were there. But sadly, I don't think her family realised, his family realised, but it was mainly her friends, the ones she could just about speak to without him knowing, that knew that there was a problem within the relationship, and it had been going on for quite a while. But the sad part is Caroline's parents, Susan and David, bought his bullshit. They believed that Babis hadn't killed her. They believed the intruder theory that two people had broken in the house to rob their money. They fully bought that. So for them to now know that he killed her, they must be devastated. He was hugging the mum at her funeral. He attended a memorial service and gave the most horrible, crappy, fake speech I've ever heard. Clearly a psycho, clearly deluded, seemed to think that he'd done it for the daughter. Well, the daughter would have wanted her mother in her life. She wouldn't have wanted the mother to be murdered by the father. So he clearly isn't all there. He can't be. But in a way, at least he's confessed. At least her family have got the truth. At least the right man is behind bars. And at least no one that didn't commit this crime was arrested, because a man was being looked into, potentially going to be arrested, that hadn't done nothing. And thank goodness that he wasn't arrested, and yet another miscarriage of justice went on in the world that didn't need to be done. So Caroline and Babis lived in a place called Glika Nera, which is near Athens in Greece. Now, she did have sort of dual nationality. I think she had parents that were from different countries, but she'd lived in England for part of her life and then had gone out to Greece and had lived there for a considerable number of years, the majority of her life. Now, she'd had the baby with Babis, and I think at the start of the relationship, all is well. He's a pilot. He's got a great job. He obviously seemed like a great catch to her, but clearly he wasn't. He was controlling. He didn't like her having friends. And you see this happen so many times. It's a bit like Britney Spears and Britney's dad. Just this coercive control, this gaslighting. It's just awful. It goes on so much. And I think Greece has been extremely shocked by this case because they don't have a high level of murder, of homicide. It just doesn't go on to the level that it does in the States and in England. We have a lot of murders. This sort of thing happens every week here. A man murdering his wife. I'm sorry to say, but it does. Domestic violence in the UK is at an all-time high. Wives are often murdered by their boyfriends or husbands. I know it's not nice, but it's a sad fact of life. For Greece, this has become as a real big shock because crimes like these just don't tend to happen in Greece. So just to give you a little bit more details about Caroline, apparently she had moved out to Greece when she was 8 years old. She'd met her husband Babis on the island, and again, if I pronounce this wrong, I'm sorry, but on the island of Alonissos, and the pair married in Portugal in 2019. So they'd only been married a couple of years. They welcomed their daughter Lydia in June 2020, so a year ago. And as I said, it was awful. She was tortured and murdered, and I believe strangled for at least 6 to 10 minutes by the husband Babis until she died. And what's awful is he put their young daughter Lydia crying and screaming her eyes out next to her mother's dead body. Now, I don't think the 11-month-old would have known what was going on, because at that age you probably don't, but she was clearly traumatized by it. I hope she doesn't remember what happened for the rest of her life. I really don't, because otherwise that's going to be a really hard life. It's going to be a hard life anyway. But wow, to lay a little helpless baby next to her dead mother's body, what the hell was he thinking? He's clearly sick, clearly very, very sick. So I'm going to read you, they're only quite short, but I'm going to read you the English version of some of the statements that he gave to the media, and just flag to you what I don't think's good, where I noticed that he's using distancing language regarding his daughter and his wife, and where it seems obvious to me that he was involved. But I just want to go back through how they actually busted him. They made him believe the police that they bought his story. They were very clever. They made him think that they bought the intruder theory. He'd said that somebody or two people that were speaking in broken Greek language, potentially not Greek nationals, broke into the house, asked him where their money was. He said it was in a Monopoly board game box, and that they stole thousands and thousands of euros, and thousands of euros worth of jewellery was stolen as well. What's interesting is, I'm going to quote you the amounts because they're quite high, but what's interesting about that is that money, I haven't heard that's been found. I haven't heard the jewellery's been found. So what did he do? Go and stash it somewhere? Considering there wasn't a break-in. So he basically says that two men break in, they threaten the wife and the child, they all beg for their lives. He's tied to the bed and has to watch his wife be suffocated to death with a pillow. I'm presuming that before that's done or after that's done, I don't know which point they're meant to have taken the money and the jewellery, and that they leave him tied up to the bed, and obviously they place the baby next to the wife's dead body, not him. But what he hadn't thought, he really hadn't thought it through. Caroline had, I don't know if it was an iWatch, but one of those watches on your wrist that I don't have one. Maybe I'll get one. Worrying. That take your heartbeat, monitor your health. So basically, from the data on that watch, her health monitor type of watch, I'm not really sure what they're called because I haven't got one. They were able to see what time she died. They were able to see how many minutes she was struggling. They were able to see when she fell asleep, how many hours she was asleep, and how deep that sleep was. Now, she falls asleep around 1 in the morning. 3 hours later, around 4 in the morning, she goes into a big struggle, and for 6 minutes is struggling for her life. Then she sadly dies. Now, the monitor on her wrist can tell exactly when she dies, exactly when the struggle begins, and how long she'd been asleep. Before she falls asleep at 1 in the morning, Babis had been on one floor, her on the top floor. They'd obviously had a big row, and that row continued through text messages, which from what I can gather were spoken in English between the two of them. Why they were spoken in English, I don't know. I presume they both spoke Greek, but perhaps they spoke English to each other. I'm not too sure. I don't know those details for definite, but the row continues into the text messages where potentially she tells him it's over, she wants to leave. And that's where I'm guessing he lets her sleep for a few hours, sits up like the dirty little psycho he is, planning what he's about to do. But he'd not considered the watch. Not only that, he told police that he'd been tied up and hadn't moved, that he'd managed to drag himself over to the phone, maybe a landline, and with his nose dial the neighbour and get the neighbour to call the police. So the neighbour calls the police find him tied up, and at first the police thought it was a break-in, to be honest. He'd made it look so obvious, not obvious, sorry, he'd made it look so much like it was a break-in, it seemed obvious to the police until they saw his strange body language and lack of emotion for his dead wife. Then they were onto him, but they didn't let him know that they were onto him, which was extremely clever of the Greek police, and kudos. I give you my thumbs up for that, because I was thinking, hold on a minute, I knew he was guilty from seconds of watching him, and I'm not a police officer. I may be a statement analyst, but I am not a trained police officer. And I remember thinking, wow, how come I knew it, but they didn't? What's going on here? They did know it. They just didn't let him know because they didn't want him to run away. They didn't want him to take his own life. They didn't want him to compromise evidence. So they let him think that they bought his story. But what he hadn't accounted for is he's such an idiot. He didn't untie himself because he was never tied up. He kills the wife, lays the dead baby next to her, then runs round the house with mobile in hand or in pocket, flapping, I imagine, going, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. Should I dump her body? Shouldn't I dump her body? Because he was considering dumping the body. And whilst he's doing all this, the data on the phone is updating to show that he's moving around the house. So he then, it's unbelievable. He then ties himself back to the bed to make it look like it was a break-in. All the while, it's quite obvious that he's been moving around the house with the phone to the police once they look at the data records of the phone, and he's busted. Let's face it, the data on his phone, and especially the data from the wife's watch, or iWatch or sports watch that monitors your heart and all your faculties, the fact that it knew her time of death, that there'd been a struggle. I mean, God, and something I thought about where the watch is concerned is why didn't he take the watch off and bin it? But something my partner said, because we've been discussing this together, was, hold on a minute, that data probably uploads to some sort of cloud on a computer. So even if he'd binned the watch, the police probably still would have been able to get him from it backing up somewhere. So that was a very good point of my boyfriend. I hadn't thought of that, so well done, Des. But I find it strange that he didn't think these things through. I mean, God, maybe he only made a split decision to murder her that night, and he clearly didn't plan it well enough. He nearly got away with it, so as he thought, but let's hope the Greek police, sorry, throw the key away. I hope he gets a long life sentence. I've got to be honest, I'm not really au fait with the Greek legal and justice system. I don't know if they give life terms like England. I don't know if they give massive tariffs like the American justice do, and I love your system, guys. I wish we'd give people 100 years here in the UK. You're lucky if you get 25 for murder. So, you know, I hope life means life. I hope he never sees the light of day again. I hope the little baby Lydia, who is only 11 months old, gets to stay with her maternal grandparents, Caroline's parents. I believe that after the death, he was still looking after her. Oh my God. He'd murdered her mother, but yet he still had custody of the child. Now he hasn't. He's obviously in prison or in custody. And I believe his father or his parents have been looking after the baby, but her parents have now come out and said they want the baby. They do not want a murderer's parents bringing up the baby, their grandchild. I believe his parents want a 50-50 custody split. But personally, I can't see any judge in any country anywhere agreeing to that. I know it's not their fault, potentially, that their son grew up to be a murderer. We don't know what happened in his childhood. He might have had an awful childhood, so it could be partly to blame at the parents' door, but we don't know any of that. But in my opinion, this little girl should grow up with her mother's father and mother, nothing to do with the father's family. I know that they should perhaps be able to see her, but in my opinion, for peace of mind for Caroline's mother and father, if ever the grandparents or aunts and uncles do see this little girl, it should be supervised. They've been through enough. They don't want to feel that, you know, she's going to be abducted and took away from them. They've already lost their daughter. You know, let them have custody. Please, I am praying that that is what happens in this case. It's such an awful case. When I first saw it in the news, I just remember thinking, wow, what's happened here? She's either cheated on you or she said she wants to leave you. Now, I don't know that she cheated, but she said she wants to leave him. Why is it that so many men, and I don't mean to be sexist here, but it is mainly men, can't take it when a woman says it's over? Can't see past that the woman doesn't want them anymore, can't see that there's more fish in the sea, and can't wish happiness on their partner or their wife if they don't want to be with them anymore, just want them dead. Like, I mean, it's unbelievable. I can't get my head around it. But it happens every day, every week, all around the world, which is really very depressing. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of Babis's statements that he gave to the media because I found them a bit disturbing. So main point here to note is there's no mention of Caroline. He doesn't use her name, and he most certainly never at any point mentions how she must have felt being murdered. Nothing. No empathy for Caroline, no sympathy, zero. Definitely a psycho. So he said, I heard my wife screaming. So as you're probably all aware, guys, if you're into psychology, that's clearly distancing language. Doesn't want to say Caroline, wants to remove himself from the situation to make himself feel better, less guilt, if he even feels guilt, probably doesn't. He then said the baby, again, not Lydia, not my daughter, our daughter, Lydia, nothing, the baby, which is really self-distancing. That's almost worse than my wife because she's your child, she's your daughter, she's called Lydia, she had a name. So that's really weird. And considering that he said that he did all this once he'd confessed for his daughter so she'd have a good life with him, he's bloody deluded. You'd killed her mother. She's not going to have a good life. And you're referring to her as the baby, like she's someone you don't give a shit about. So that's weird. So he said, the baby was crying. My wife was crying. Again, not Caroline, my wife. So that's three distancing language bits that I've just seen here. So the baby was crying, my wife was crying, and someone or some people were looking around the house for money and jewellery. Now, he's not said how he knows that, and that it was someone or some people. Now, if there was more than one person that had broken into your house, unless they didn't communicate or speak to each other, most of the time you'd know there was more than one person if there were two. Now, even if they didn't communicate and speak to each other verbally, you'd hear people in different parts of the house unless they went around every room together. So I don't buy that. That seems like bullshit. How would you know they were looking for money or jewellery if they hadn't spoken to you already? And apparently the house hadn't been ransacked in the way that a normal burglary would be. So again, more red flags for Babis there. He clearly messed up. Apparently, they suddenly left the room. This is the intruders, the robbers, and he couldn't hear his wife's voice anymore. Apparently, 15,000 euros went missing, and 25,000 worth of jewellery. Now, from what I can gather, I don't know that much about Caroline's family, but they were quite wealthy. For there to be 25,000 euros worth of jewellery in any house is a lot to me. I don't have thousands of pounds worth of jewellery. I have a couple of little small bits of jewellery, you know, that are nice, that might be worth a little bit of money, but certainly not that amount of money. So she must have had money, or her family must have had money, considering she was only 20 and she had a little baby and she was a student. She clearly can't have been earning a lot of money. He was a pilot, so he must have earned a fair bit of money, but the majority of the money lied with her family, and I'm now wondering if that's why he got with her in the first place. Was he just after her money? Which, if true, is really, really, really rather sad. So I've just got a few more lines of this media interview that he gave, statements that I want to go through. And again, this has been translated from Greek into English, so it may not be perfect word for word, but it gives you a general gist of what he said. So something else he said, and again, just bullshit flowing out of the man's mouth. I wish no one ever goes through what we, note the word we, went through last night. Not what my wife went through. She's dead. You're still alive. Not your poor baby had to lie next to her dead mother. No. Not the woman's dead. No. No sympathy for your wife? No. Zero. So no wonder the police were onto him. So again, I wish no one ever goes through what we went through that night. Now, by using we, he's making it so that he was part of it. He wants sympathy, making it a collective thing. We, not just me, not just my wife, not just my daughter. But weirdly, what he should be doing if he cared about his wife was making it all about her, not about him. And the fact that he doesn't do that is a major, major red flag. So then he says, it was a nightmare. Well, yeah, I imagine it was. You sicko. Something else as well, just going back to that first statement, I wish no one ever goes through what we went through last night. It's almost as if he's already processed her death. There's no shock here about her death. He hasn't got fight or flight. There's nothing there that shows that your wife got murdered and you loved her. There's someone here that's very dodgy and is hiding something, and I think the police must have known. They must have known when he was giving this interview for sure. So he said, we begged the thieves not to hurt us. We told them where the money was and asked them to leave us alone. So note here, always us and we we begged, we told them, never me. Not I told them to leave my wife alone. I said, please don't hurt Caroline. Please don't kill my wife. Don't hurt my baby. There's no urgency. There's no care. There's no empathy. There's just coldness. Just coldness. Horrible, horrible bastard. So the last statement that he gives, I shouldn't laugh because a woman's been murdered, but dumb criminals do tend to make me laugh. I can't help it. The last thing that he said was, the police will catch them. Not you're going to look for them. Not you're going to find them. And when I find you for what you've done to my wife, I'm going to do it to you. You better be worried. You better not be sleeping at night. That's what a normal husband would say to the killers of his wife if he loved his wife. And if there really were killers out there. So clearly there weren't. Clearly he was lying from the beginning. The self-distancing language for me is quite a red flag. You know, the no love for the wife, the no urgency, that's the most worrying thing. No urgency to find the killers. You know, if someone had killed someone you loved, you'd want to find them. You'd want to kill them yourself, most likely. Hopefully you wouldn't, but you'd want to inflict pain on them if you're a normal human with passion and love inside your heart. Not zero empathy, zero sympathy, zero nothing. No passion, no urgency, no nothing. That, for me, even though he was speaking in a foreign language when I first heard him on the telly or on an app on my phone, a news app, I remember thinking, wow, you're emotionless. I know not everybody is real emotionful, and you know, some people love people without showing it overly, but there was nothing. He was devoid of emotions, and he just seemed like a psycho to me from day one. So I'm glad he's confessed. I'm glad he's been caught. I'm glad that the Greek police had his number, because for a while there I didn't think they did, and I was quite worried about their police work. Sorry, I take it back. You've obviously got it on smash. Great. Put him down for life. hope he gets at least 25 years. And considering he's only 33 years old, give him 50. In fact, tell him he's got a whole life tariff. What he did to his wife is disgusting. The way he covered it up is disgusting. And to lay a little helpless 11-month-old baby next to a dead body, screaming, he's sick, he's nasty, he deserves to be locked up and have the key thrown away. And I really, really hope that's what happens to Babis, because he is nasty. So I'm going to show you a clip in a few seconds of Babis giving an interview to the media not long after Caroline has been brutally murdered. Now bear in mind at this point, guys, that Babis is still claiming the intruder theory, that 2 people broke in and murdered his wife. Clearly that's not what happened. We all know that now. But it's extremely interesting to watch him with the sound off to look at his body language. So I'm going to show you the video shortly and give you my analysis of his body language. And then I'm going to include the video again with the language, which I appreciate is in Greek. So not many people are going to understand it. But I just want to show you it with the sound off, with my analysis, and with the sound on, so you can judge him for yourself and see what a pretty shitty liar Babis really is. So to start with, you'll notice that Babis is putting his hands over his face. And clearly, when he's doing that, I believe that he's doing it because he's holding back information. And it's sort of a gesture that he's trying to sort of hide something, keep everything in. So that's what I take from that. I also note that he looks more annoyed than upset, generally. There's quite a lack of eye contact here. Look at him. He does occasionally look up at the reporters, but he tends to often then look back down at the floor, which is quite suspicious. He's generally, in my opinion, quite shifty and dodgy looking. Just my opinion, guys. He touches his head and hair there, as if in despair at all the questions that he's being asked. And he clearly does not want to speak to the reporters and the press. Someone who genuinely loved their wife would not act in the way that he is. He's trying to desperately get in the car, as you can see there. He doesn't want to get Caroline's stories out there in the public eye. If she had really been murdered, he'd be desperate to tell her story. Look at his body language. He's very tense. He doesn't want to be there. He clearly wants to get in that car and bugger off and escape. He's clearly acting strangely and quite evasively. If you were someone that genuinely hadn't murdered your wife, you wouldn't be acting like that. He shrugs the shoulders there, if you look, more than once. Clearly not bothered by Caroline's death, is what I take from that. He clearly looks very tense and can't wait to get in that car and escape. There's no sadness on his face, within his eyes, or his facial expressions. He generally looks quite pissed off. There's zero empathy, zero sympathy, no emotion, nothing for his wife Caroline. And if you watch here, just as he's about to get into the car, he touches his eyes. I think that's just about to come up now. He's just asking the last couple of questions. And that, where he does the gesture of touching his eyes, that's something known as the eye rub. And it's quite an interesting act, really, of body language. Here we go, there it is. It's something that generally men do. It's quite an odd thing, but it's called the eye rub. And the reason for that, it's the brain's attempt to block out deceit, doubt, or distasteful thing it sees, or it's to avoid having to look at the face of the person who is being lied to. Generally, men are known to usually rub their eyes vigorously, and if the lie is a real whopper, they will often look away. Well, as you saw back there, guys, he really does rub them eyes quite a lot. He's definitely trying to keep the deceit in, not that the lies flow out the mouth, and he's really struggling with the eye contact. He doesn't want to look at the media. He wants to get in that car, flee, get his daughter, and hope to God that he's not about to be busted for the brutal murder, savage murder of his wife, Caroline Crouch.
Και είναι τώρα που μιλάμε, και τις 3 τελευταίες μέρες ήμασταν όλοι μαζί. Δουλεύουν όλη μέρα, όλο το βράδυ, όλη τη μέρα η αστυνομία των ανθρωποκτονιών. Υπάρχει φως στην έρευνα. Αν υπάρχει κάποιος που μπορεί να τους βρει, είναι τα παιδιά αυτά. Από το πρωί μέχρι το βράδυ. Ελπίζετε. Είναι εκεί. Συνειδητοποίησε μετά από μέρες, γιατί έχει περάσει το πρώτο σοκ. Τώρα που συνειδητοποίησε τα πράγματα. Δεν έχει περάσει το πρώτο σοκ. Δεν έχει περάσει. Do you have something to say to the UK audience? We're all very upset about what happened to Caroline. Not more than that. I'm sure you are, sir. Please accept our condolences. Πιστεύετε ότι η αστυνομία έχει στοιχεία στα χέρια της, καταλήγει κάπου? Έχει όσα περισσότερα μπορούσαμε να μαζέψουμε και κάθε μέρα αυτή τη στιγμή είναι 10, 15, 20 άνθρωποι στο δρόμο και ψάχνουν. Αυτό ξέρω, είναι κάθε με συνέχεια σε επικοινωνία μαζί μου όσο έχω μπορέσει να τους βοηθήσω. Αν υπάρχει κάποιος που μπορεί να τους βρει, θα τους βρουν τα παιδιά αυτά.
Ήταν τόσο σκληροί. Δηλαδή δεν καταλάβαιναν από τα παρακάλια σας, από αυτά που τους λέγατε, τις οικεσίες, όλα αυτά τα πράγματα.
Μας έδεσαν και από εκείνο το σημείο και μετά δεν τους είχαμε πει ήδη που είναι τα χρήματα. Δεν ξέρω.
Εσύ κατάφερες και πήρες τηλέφωνο. Όταν συνειδητοποίησες ότι η γυναίκα σου δεν βρίσκεται σε ζωή.
Όταν με έλυσαν η αστυνομία. Όταν ήρθαν οι αστυνόμοι μέσα και με έλυσαν και έβγαλαν από το κεφάλι μου τα δεσμά.
Και η κορούλα?
Η κορούλα μου ευτυχώς δεν έχει χτυπήσει, πήγε στο νοσοκομείο προληπτικά και ευτυχώς είναι καλά.
Σε ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Έχεις κάποιο μήνυμα? Έχεις κάποιο μήνυμα να στείλεις?
Παιδιά, συγγνώμη, δεν είμαι καθόλου καλά.
Παρακαλείς εσύ, φαντάζομαι, σε όποιον γνωρίζει κάτι να μιλήσει.
Όποιος γνωρίζει κάτι, είμαι σίγουρος ότι το κάνει ήδη. Όποιος γνωρίζει, όποιος δει κάτι, είμαι σίγουρος ότι θα τρέξει. Έχουμε πάρει πολύ αγάπη από όλο τον κόσμο.
Έχεις ανθρώπους κοντά σου?
Έχω πολλούς ανθρώπους κοντά μου. Έχω πολλούς και η κόρη μας το ίδιο.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
So sorry I've been so passionate in this video, but domestic abuse and, you know, women being treated the way that Caroline was by her husband really gets to me. You know, she was 20 years old. She was a beautiful young woman. She had her whole life ahead of her. And how her parents, Susan and David, are going to cope without her for the rest of their lives. They're going to have a big void in their heart. At least they're going to have Lydia, I hope, to bring up and to have her live with them, the little baby, their granddaughter. But no one will ever replace their daughter. No one can bring back Caroline. You know, what Babis was thinking, I don't know. Like I said, I can't get my head around people that think they can end someone's life because they don't want to be with them anymore. I cannot get my head around the psychology of that. I find it fascinating from a criminology point of view and a psychology point of view, but because I'm a normal person that's not a psycho that's ever killed anyone, and I don't have tendencies to want to kill someone, I can't function it in my brain. I can't process what he did. I can't understand what he did. I can't understand why he did it and what he did to the little baby, and then trying to say that it was all for the baby. It's mind-boggling. But for normal people like us guys that don't do these nasty things, it is mind-boggling. Fascinating all the same, but always mind-boggling as to what goes on in these killers' minds that makes them do what they do. Really disturbing, and for Caroline and her family, extremely tragic. So anyway, guys, as I said, I hope Babis is going to be rotting in prison. I hope they get the key, lock him up and throw it away. Leave him there, leave him rotting where he belongs. Nasty, nasty piece of work. As I said, if there's any more news on this case, because he is in court in Greece at the moment, I'd like to know how many years he gets, if there's any update on his sentencing and any more from her parents and family. I will, of course, update you. I'm sorry I didn't update you a month ago on this video. I should have trusted my gut and my instincts, but I knew he was dodgy. I knew from the second I saw him on the telly. It's almost weird. You look back at cases over the years where you felt this strongly about someone's guilt. The McCanns spring to mind. Joanne Lees springs to mind. I'm not saying Barrymore for having involvement in Stuart Lubbock's death, but Barrymore's lies about the guilty knowledge he has. He knows who killed Stuart Lubbock. I don't think it was him, but I think he knows who. Everybody like those people. When I see them on the telly giving that first interview, you know within seconds if they're guilty. You just have a feeling, maybe even without hearing the statement. Sometimes literally just from the body language alone, maybe watch it on mute or in a foreign language like Greece that you can't actually understand with no subtitles. And that body language often tells you all you need to know. It really does. So anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I'll be back very, very soon, as always, with another true crime video. You take care and stay safe, and I'll be back very soon. Bye for now.